Welcome to the Author's Edge radio show with Gael Freer. Now, their show airs nationwide on the My Genre Radio Network, Monday through Friday at 2 p.m. and 7 p.m. Each week on their show, they help authors create books that transform our lives and imaginations. Through radio excellence, they create a unique community resource, one that promotes, connects, and fosters a sense of well-being. Gael maintain a focus on sharing books, publishing, marketing, and writing solutions. They serve listeners by providing outlets for their creative skills and energies, and they help them flourish in the competitive marketplace. Their weekly show provides intros, writing spotlights, helps you in promoting your book, your writing, your publishing, your marketing tidbits, and much more.
Welcome to Author's Edge, where we engage in lively conversations with both emerging and seasoned writers, as well as publishers, songwriters, illustrators, and artists to explore the art of storytelling. And today I want to welcome my co-host, award-winning Greg Stout. Ta-da! He won the Seamus Award. Oh, I like this. Clapping.
The Peanut Gallery.
Yes, the Peanut Gallery is clapping away. Woo. Today, he won the Seamus Award, which is an annual award given by the Private Eye Writers of America, PWA, to recognize outstanding achievement in private eye fiction. He has been on our show a couple of times, right, Greg?
Twice as a guest, once as a host.
All right, and has written a series with Detective Jackson Gamble. His latest is Long Time Gone. So welcome to the show, Greg, again.
Thank you. Long Time Gone out in November the 5th, release date.
Oh, okay, great.
We're there.
Wonderful. Today, we are thrilled to be chatting with Clarissa Willis. She is calling in from Eureka Springs, Arkansas, right?
I've been there.
Clarissa?
Yes.
Welcome to our show, Clarissa. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great.
Before we dive in, let me share a little about Clarissa's background. Clarissa Willis is the daughter of a minister and a drama teacher. She has always had an active imagination and enjoys speaking and writing. She was a major corporation senior vice president of a publishing and has been an educator for over 40 years. As a child growing up in Little Rock, Arkansas, she wrote stories and got into trouble for a variety of mishaps, from the attempted murder of her brother, which we will get into because I really want to know more about that, a crime which she swears was not her fault, to robbing the collection of plate at church. She earned a PhD from the University of Southern Mississippi in her early childhood, a special education. In her professional life, Dr. Willis has provided workshops and keynote addresses in all 50 states and 3 foreign countries. Clarissa has written a curricula for Frog Street Press, Kaplan Early Learning Company, and Scholastic. She is the author of 19 teacher resource books, including the award-winning Teaching Young Children with Autism Spectrum Disorder. In addition, she has written 4 children's books and is working on a memoir. So welcome to Author's Edge, Clarissa.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're so welcome. I have to ask, attempted murder of your brother? Please explain. That sounds either very terrifying or hilarious.
Basically, as a young child, I really thought the world revolved around me. And some people say I still feel that way, but
don't we all?
Don't we all? And they basically brought a monster to live in my house. I didn't want him there, so I simply reenacted the story of Moses. And if you remember, Moses was much better off when his sister put him to float in the river. So I simply put my brother in a laundry basket and set him to float in the Red River, which fortunately was a very small stream behind our home. And he was rescued by the mother figure, at which point they had a very active discussion with both my front side and my back side.
Oh, my goodness. Well, yes, I want to know, did you and your brother get along after that, or was there?
That's another story for another day. But actually, my brother he's one of my best friends. And but growing up, he would probably beg to differ until I started driving, at which point we became very good friends.
There was a need.
there was a need there. But no, I was just reenacting a few Bible stories, and he just happened to get in to the wrong side of that one.
Oh, my goodness gracious. How did growing up in Arkansas shape you along with being the product of a minister's daughter?
Well, it was certainly different because my mother was very vivacious, and she had been a semi-professional actress, and she taught drama. My father was a very soft-spoken man, and so it was so interesting because they were together almost 50 years until his death. So it was very different. I'm just as comfortable in a church as I am on stage. But even as a small child, I just loved to tell stories and act out stories. My maternal grandmother was not allowed to graduate from the 11th grade because she couldn't afford a white dress and shoes. So she had a huge impact on my life. She loved to write, and she would take me outside. We didn't have air conditioning on summer days, and we would create stories together. And that has just been sort of my life's work. I love telling stories. Even when I was in the classroom, my college students may not remember the subject, but they would remember the stories that I told.
Yes, I do recall doing that. Same thing when I was teaching. I would tell the stories, and I think that sometimes the students would remember the stories better than they would remember the curriculum.
I agree, although several of them did write, but they weren't entirely sure if some of the stories weren't slightly embellished.
Oh,
and
well.
for that, I will just call that poetic license.
Absolutely. What inspired your career in the early childhood special education?
I started out as a speech pathologist, and I kept getting selected to work with children on the autism spectrum. Later, I found out I was selected because no one else would do it. But nonetheless, I really wanted to pursue getting this PhD, and so I loved working with young children. So the University of Southern Mississippi offered an opportunity for me to get the PhD without having to go back and get a second master's degree. So I loved my time down there. Taught a young man known as Brett Favre, who did play a little football while I was there. But just really have always loved working with children with special needs and working to help them be more included with their typically developing peers. So that just sort of led me to also writing fiction.
You know, I'd really like to talk a little bit more about your budding career as a career criminal. I'm curious, how much did you get off the collection plate?
Well, not very much, because the hand of God manifested itself in the hand of my father.
I see.
But at that particular time, we were in what they call Bible school, where we would all get, make crafts and get free food,
yes.
and wearing our Easter outfits that were about 2 sizes too small. And I kept hearing about how missionaries were getting killed overseas. So I figured if they were going to die, they didn't need the money anyway. So I just sort of helped myself to the money.
That's an excellent rationale if you're considering a life of crime. They didn't need the money, so I took it.
Exactly. Fortunately, as I got older, I learned that those kinds of antics probably were not going to turn out well for me. So I can honestly say that I have had very little run-in with the law since I became a teenager and an adult.
Okay, so after that, you spent 40 years, I see here, in education. Was all of that teaching, or was there administrative stuff to go with it?
I was a teacher. I was an administrator. I left for 5 years and was senior vice president of publishing and international publications for Kaplan Early Learning Company. And it was a great gig. I traveled all over the world, got to visit so many different places. And Kaplan is the premier provider for early childhood services, birth through 3rd grade. So that was a wonderful experience. But as I got older, the 90% travel was starting to wear on me.
Yes.
So about the time the first grandchild hit, I went back and became a professor again at the University of Southern Indiana, which is where I retired from a year or so ago.
And then went to Arkansas.
Then came home to Arkansas. My one daughter and grandchildren had relocated to Northwest Arkansas. So I came back up here and so to be closer to them.
Well, what challenges would you say you faced most often in early education? And I have a little bit of background with this. My wife taught preschool for a number of years,
Oh,
and,
yeah.
and she finally had to give it up because she said it wrecked her knees because she was on the floor all the time.
Yeah, that was for certain. Well, the challenges that I have faced is the continued lack of understanding that the earlier that we reach these children with special needs and we start services, the better the prognosis. And so really the whole focus, in fact, I just got through writing an inclusive guide for Frog Street Press that was to help those regular preschool teachers just have the strategies and the resources they need to include children with special needs. So not just children on the autism spectrum, although they are the great love of my life. Certainly all children that may have some special needs, even behavior issues, to make things more inclusive. So that is an ongoing challenge. I still do a lot of speaking on that subject. And so that's really the biggest issue. And it was an issue when I started, and it's less of an issue now, but it's still there.
I had somebody on the spectrum, I'll say. I'm not quite sure how to characterize him in one of my classes one time. I taught for 12 years at the end of my working life. And I remember we had a student teacher, and she was doing her best. And I was sitting in the back with this kid, and somebody asked a question, and he turned to me and he said, if I was as dumb as the rest of these kids, I'd kill myself. and the other kids were okay with that because they had gotten to know him. And I really found that those kids were the most fun.
They were. And so many of our children on the spectrum, especially the ones that are more verbal and have less behavior challenges, really some of the things they can say are really just surprising and amazing and really make them delightful friends. One of my first children's books was called Anderson the Ornithologist, and it was actually based on a little boy that I worked with who loved ornithology. And he was 5, and most kids 5 really don't get into that, and how he made his first friend. And I am so pleased to say that Frog Street Press has now bought the rights to that book and will be including it in their preschool curriculum.
Well, that'll be great. And I found that those kids are really, in many ways, more insightful, than the kids that we said, oh, they're normal. But some of those guys they asked better questions. They saw things differently.
Oh, sure.
How did you get into consulting?
Well, most of the consulting I just fell into. My book, Teaching Young Children with Autism Spectrum Disorder, was originally written in 2006 for preschool teachers who were needing to find out, what do I do with this child that has this particular collection of symptoms, whether or not they've been diagnosed or not. And then we revised it in 2016. But that book has been published in 12 languages and is one of the top-selling books in the country for preschool teachers. And so that naturally opened doors for me to consult. I've done I'm not a medical doctor, so I don't make medical diagnoses, but I did a lot, especially really from about 2006 on to even today. I will still go out and provide workshops. And then when I do workshops, if a school district brings me in or a Head Start, I love working with Head Start. I always do a parent workshop for free. So if they're paying me to come anyway, let's just throw in a parent workshop. And that has a lot of appeal for people who are on a tighter budget, because I think if we can partner with parents, both the children and the teachers are going to have a much better experience.
Absolutely.
Chrissy, could you tell us exactly what the definition of autism is for our audience? Because I think sometimes we are not quite sure what that exactly means.
Well, basically what it is a group of symptoms. And that's why we love the term autism spectrum disorder. Now, I don't get into causality. I leave that to the medical professionals. But it is a collection of symptoms typically involves communication, behavior, and how a child reacts to sensory stimulation. Now, again, because it's a spectrum, some children have very mild characteristics. Some children have very, very severe characteristics. We have, it's sort of an all-encompassing term now, because as put in what we call the DSM-5, which is the Diagnostic Statistical Manual
Yes.
for the American Psychological Association, this really lists a whole bunch of characteristics. And so you really want to get a medical diagnosis from a professional. Now, there are some places that also look at educational definitions as well, but I mainly try to deal with Head Starts, preschools, kindergartens, first grades, where maybe the child isn't completely diagnosed yet and we aren't 100% sure it's autism, but we're still seeing some of the same symptoms. So really to give teachers those kinds of strategies. But you talk to any 5 professionals and you're probably going to get 5 different definitions.
Okay. All right. Well, you are listening to Clarissa Willis chatting about her book, Bloomers on Pikes Peak, the story of Julia Archibald Holmes, and on Author's Edge, coming to you live weekly on Saturdays at 8 a.m. and Sunday at 7 a.m. on KWRH929.com, KXOK102.com, iHeart app, Odyssey app, iTunein app, Monday to Friday, 2 p.m. and 7 p.m. nationwide on My Genre Radio. You can also listen to us anytime on SoundCloud and YouTube. But so let's talk about your new book, Bloomers on Pikes Peak. You sent me a copy of the front cover, which I have right here on our table right here in the studio, so everybody can see what the front cover looks like. And the quote that you gave us was Julia Archibald Holmes was a woman before her time. As the first known pioneer woman to climb Pikes Peak, she always believed that success comes when you never give up. She learned this lesson early as she helped her family run a stop on the Underground Railroad, and later as she fought for the right for women to vote. So what inspired you to write Bloomers on Pikes Peak, the story of Julia Archibald Holmes? It's actually, the front cover is just adorable.
Thank you. I was very, very fortunate in that there is an up-and-coming young illustrator named Armand Hayes, who is just amazing. He did the illustrations, and Sharon Keziah Holmes helped to design the book. But what really, really inspired me, the books I try to write for children are books with a message. And Julia was a woman who, in the 1850s, in the 1840s, was growing up at a time when women didn't have a voice. And her parents were very progressive. And so, to me, her story of never giving up and being the first woman to go where no woman has gone before that we know of. Certainly some indigenous people may well have climbed it. But as far as history goes, we know that she was the first pioneer woman to do so. So I wrote the book in an effort to help children recognize that if you just set a goal and keep trying, you can succeed. You know, I'm finding that while I have certainly written some fiction children's books, I'm loving nonfiction. I've always loved history. And I was at Western Writers of America this past summer and actually saw a photo display of people who traveled the Santa Fe Trail and accomplishments. And I saw just a paragraph about Julia. And I thought, wow, to my knowledge, no one has written a children's book about her. And so that's what I did. I started researching and talking to people and found this wonderful illustrator. And that's sort of how it came to be. But the real inspiration was Julia, not only Julia herself, but her lifetime commitment, from her work on the Underground Railroad to her later work in trying to obtain the right of women to vote. You know, she wore bloomers, which were basically a short skirt with pants that were just quite unheard of in the 1800s. So that's what inspired me to do that book.
In the story, how old was she when she climbed Pikes Peak?
19.
19. Okay. So That would relate to a certain degree with younger readers because, one of the things that you try to do when you write YA books, and I've done that, is teaching kids that they can sort of be the hero of their own story. And you mentioned that was significant, I guess, for her because why? Because she accomplished, was that her goal?
No, she and her husband went out to be went out to look for gold. When they decided that was much more difficult, they decided to climb the mountain. But the book I wrote before that was about the first rider on the Pony Express, Johnny Fry, and he was probably 13 or 14 when he did that.
Really?
So there's sort of a theme going. That book, Fast as the Wind, won a Will Rogers Medallion Award in 2023, which has been one of my goals to win because it's quite a neat honor.
Do you have a trophy case in your home?
No, I do not. No, I do not have a trophy case in my home. But I just, once I retired, I decided I wanted to really write children's books. And then I wanted to help other authors write quality children's books. There's so much being put out every day that I really wanted to help independent authors produce books that were high quality. And so not only do I do my own books, but I do help other authors do their books as well.
Sure.
And we're winning awards, and that's really exciting to me.
It is. Okay, so you have written 4 other children's books. We touched on a couple of them: Anderson the Ornithologist, The Story of Johnny Fry, Fast as the Wind, Critter Invasion, and Critter Crew. We need to talk about the critters. Critter Invasion and Critter Crew to the Rescue. What's that?
These two kind of dealt with anxiety, childhood anxiety. That's interesting you bring those two up because those two were done with a traditional publisher, and I have certainly published traditionally and have had some very good experiences. But I find as an indie author, I can put more of my own imprint on things. So there were a couple of things that were maybe changed in those critter books that had I had more input as an independent author, I might have done differently. But those two books were sort of my first sticking the toe in the water, and that's when I decided I really would rather go the indie route than the traditional route.
Okay. Who are those books aimed at exactly? What age group?
Almost everything I do is aimed at anywhere from 5 to 8-year-olds, maybe 9-year-olds.
Okay, so these are not like 360-page novels then.
Oh, no. These are definitely children's books. And I had the fortune of working with Dylan Hale, who is an amazing illustrator and art teacher in the Northwest Arkansas area. So fortunately, Dylan has now gone freelance, so I'm able to still use him with some of our books. But those books were great fun. They just came from an idea I had about, again, trying to do books that help children and their parents. So in the back of that book, those books are some ideas about how to recognize childhood anxiety and what to do if your child is overly anxious.
Okay.
Just like in the back of my Fast as the Wind and Bloomers on Pikes Peak, there is a page just for more information or what you might learn, a glossary, those kinds of things, so that they can be used as teaching tools.
Where does Asperger's fit on the spectrum? What is that?
Oh boy, now you promised you weren't going to ask me any loaded questions.
I didn't think it was loaded. I take it back.
It's a very loaded question.
Oh no, I'm sorry.
In the new guidelines, they no longer recognize Asperger's as being part of the autism spectrum.
Really?
Now, that is where we get into the difference between an educational diagnosis and a medical diagnosis.
Okay.
Certainly,
because you have that. The only reason that came up was because of Anderson's The Ornithologist.
Yes, and that book was written when Asperger's was still considered. There used to be categories of autism. There was
okay.
Asperger's. There was pervasive developmental delay, not otherwise specified. There was what was known as global autism, and so they kind of took all of those and lumped them into the term autism spectrum disorder.
Okay.
So there are certainly children with what I call Asperger-like characteristics that still fit in the spectrum, but because there is no longer a label Asperger syndrome, there were some people that got very upset over that.
And how does it manifest itself?
Which one? Asperger's?
Yes, Asperger's.
Well, children with Asperger's, or children who used to be classified as Asperger's, tend to have, they tend to be more high functioning. They tend to be a little more verbal. As a rule, they tend to have less of what we call the more global severe behavior issues. Many children with Asperger's go on to do, I have one student that I worked with who went on to become a very well-known marine biologist, but he still has to be reminded to do things like lock his apartment and put on deodorant. So if that just is one example, kind of gives you an idea. But to me, I love working with challenges. So if a child has a challenge, I don't really care what label they've been given. I love to work with families to figure out solutions to the challenge their child is presenting.
Okay.
And a child with autism is not, you have a child with Down syndrome and they're going to have a lot of commonalities. To me, the beauty of autism is that no two children will present alike in any form or fashion.
Okay.
All right. Well, we're going to have to go to a break so Clarissa, you just hold on for a second.
Sure.
And let us go to a break. And I have a commercial that we need to do. Are you an author, publisher, editor, illustrator, songwriter, or artist looking to expand your reach? Advertise on Author's Edge to connect with your passionate readers and industry insiders. With engaging interviews, reviews, and discussions, your book will shine. Why choose us? Reach thousands of book lovers, boost sales and visibility, targeted, impactful ads, trusted host endorsements. Elevate your presence with Author's Edge. Contact us today at 573-714-1352, where authors and readers meet. And we're going to go to commercial. Hold on.
The United States has a strong tradition of welcoming newcomers and refugees. The Welcome Corps is a new service opportunity for Americans inspired to welcome those seeking freedom and safety and in turn help strengthen their own communities. Welcome Corps is a public-private partnership that is inspired by what Americans represent to so many around the world, a beacon of hope and refuge. All it takes is a helping hand. Are you ready to learn more? Contact the International Institute of St. Louis at info@iistl.org or call 314-773-9090. That's info@iistl.org or call 314-773-9090.
El Potro Restaurant and Market, located at 6920 Manchester Avenue, 1 block east of McCausland, offers the finest variety of Mexican and Central American groceries and goods. El Potro Restaurant serves authentic Mexican and Central American cuisine, including daily specials, not to mention the best horchata and tastiest margaritas in St. Louis. Open 7 days a week. El Potro, 6920 Manchester Avenue, 1 block east of McCausland.
In 1857, the Dred Scott decision was a major legal event and catalyst that contributed to the Civil War. The decision declared that Dred Scott could not be free because he was not a citizen. The 14th Amendment, also called the Dred Scott Amendment, granted citizenship to all born or naturalized here in our country and was intended to overturn the U.S. Supreme Court decision on July 9, 1868. The Dred Scott Heritage Foundation is requesting a commemorative stamp to be issued from the U.S. Postal Service to recognize and remember the heritage of this amendment by issuing a stamp with the likeness of the man Dred Scott. But we need your support and the support of thousands of people who would like to see this happen. To achieve this goal, we ask you to download, sign, and share the one-page petition with others. To find the petition, please go to dredscottlives.org and click on the Dred Scott Petition Drive on the right side of the page.
And we're back. You are listening to Author's Edge, and we are chatting with Clarissa Willis about her books on child development and her children's books. So you also have resources for teachers as well as children's books. Teacher resource books revolve around autism and special needs, a few of the titles, and there is a long list here. Teaching young children with autism, spectrum disorder, inclusive literary lessons, creating inclusive literary lessons, environments for young children, what to do on Monday morning. I can answer that. Teaching infants, toddlers, and twos with special needs. My child has autism, what parents need to know. Strategies for children with special needs. Why did you decide to write teacher reference guides?
It was just a natural extension to what I already did as a speaker and a consultant. I just would see a need and write a book. I was very, very fortunate that Griffin House Publishing, which published a lot of my books, and they were an amazing company. Griffin House was an amazing company to work with. They honored me as an author and let me have some input. The same thing with Frog Street Press. You know, both of those companies just were a dream to work with. They, allowed me to say, hey, there's a need here, and I have an idea for a book. And then we collaborated, and voila, they printed and published my books. Okay. So it was just a natural extension of what I did, just like my post-retirement work with Solander Press is a natural extension of what I want to do.
Okay, what's the difference between writing a resource book for teachers and, say, any other nonfiction book?
I think the difference is that there's a lot of nonfiction that's written out there, but it doesn't necessarily address the intended audience. And so when you write for teachers, you have to have been a teacher and they recognize this and have some real good examples and real good strategies. You know, while the pedagogy is great and all the background information is great, teachers want to know, basically, what do I do on Monday morning when I walk in that classroom and XYZ is happening? So much of what I did was practical information that teachers could pick up and use right then.
Well, I can tell you, I went through teacher preparation in graduate school, and they didn't tell me anything about what to do when I walked into the classroom.
On Monday morning.
Yes, I did that book with Sage and Corwin, and I loved the title.
The only thing I got out of that whole program was adolescent psychology, because I had 8th graders.
Yes.
Yes. What were the challenges you faced writing these books?
Well, every set of book has its challenges. When I wrote most of the teacher resources, I was working full time. So I was either teaching college, or I was a special education teacher, or I was working for Kaplan, traveling 80% of the time. So when I wrote those, those were written between midnight and 4 a.m.,
Yep.
depending on how you look at it. What is so nice about being, I use the word retired in parentheses, is that now I can spend more time doing things at a little bit slower pace and things that I've always dreamed about doing.
Were these indie books, or were these traditionally published?
All the teacher resource books I ever published, except for one, were traditionally published.
Okay. So then you would have had editors breathing down your neck, yes?
I would have had editors. I would have had deadlines. I would have had
fact checkers.
I would have had fact checkers. I would have had people, with deadlines. And when I went to work for Kaplan, I really realized the importance of a deadline. I mean, you miss a deadline for a traditional publisher, and there are a whole set of things you set in motion that are challenging.
Tell me about it.
So that was one of the biggest challenges. And so what I wanted to do was I wanted to help people indie publish. And again, I want to make it clear, I'm not talking about self-publishing. Self-publishing is when you say, hey, I want to write a book. I write it, I format it, and I throw it out there to the world and hope people buy it. Indie publishing, you get the same resources that you have when you traditionally publish. And while you may pay, and in many cases, very reasonable amount for it, it's still very professional. And I think a lot of times people don't recognize that there is a huge difference between indie publishing and self-publishing.
Well, in addition to Missouri Writers Guild, in which we are both participants, I belong to 2 local writers guilds, and we do have indie authors and we do have self-published. And you are absolutely correct. There is a big difference because the people who go the indie route have professional support. Now, it does cost them some money, but I think they end up with a better product.
Well, and I think that's a great point, because I think it's important to recognize that we are not talking about predatory vanity presses here. A predatory vanity press will send out an email and say, "Oh, I want to publish your book, and for $999 or $9,000 or however huge amount it is, we're going to publish your book, and you're going to have to buy your books from us, and hey, we may give you 60% of the net."
Mm-hmm.
But they don't tell you that nets after they take out all their costs. And so that's what I call predatory vanity presses. What I'm talking about is paying a reasonable fee for a professional to make you have a professional product that you can be proud of.
Yes, and that typically, in my limited experience with this, it's going to run $1,500 to $2,000, something like that.
It literally depends.
Yes.
It depends on. It's much less than that if you are doing a book that doesn't have illustrations.
Right.
Yes.
If you are doing, and I don't take, as the owner of Solander Press, I do not take every book that comes my way. I only take books that I think are going to make a difference to children and families. We write books for children and a few for the adults in their life. So we've done a couple of Westerns. We've done a couple of adult fiction. But our sweet spot is children's, middle grade, and YA.
Okay. And I guess I didn't get that earlier. So you have a publishing company as well.
Yes, Solander Press. And it's my post-retirement baby. It's something I have wanted to do for years and years. But Solander really does help independent authors. We currently have about 30 authors that we're working with, but they keep 100% of the royalty. They purchase their books at minimal prices directly from the print-on-demand publisher. I step away once their book is out. I also offer help with marketing if they want it. Another kind of side business of mine is I work in the international book market. So all of my Solander authors can be represented internationally, not to sell their book in English, but to sell their book in other languages.
How do you manage that?
I go to international book shows and I make international contacts. Because I did that when I was a chaplain, it's pretty easy to, last year I went to the Frankfurt Book Show. I typically go to the London Children's Book Show, and I take my author's books that are not American themed, because nobody really cares about American themed books but us. But for example, one of our books that has done really, really well is Hello, Can I Bug You? About a little boy who likes bugs and keeps giving them to the little girls in his classroom. Well, that's universal. And so that book has done really well on the international market. So I just help my authors get their books published in other languages, much the way that a traditional publisher helped me get my autism book published in 12 languages. So that's sort of something that I offer to my Solander authors.
So you're more of a hybrid, I guess. Would that be a fair description?
No, it is not a fair description.
Okay.
A hybrid printer, typically you have to buy your books from the publisher. And the publisher gives you royalties. We don't do any of that. We are a publishing service.
Okay.
So you're more like a publishing coach.
More like a publishing coach or a publishing service that helps people be part of a group of authors at Solander who are really top notch. I mean, as I said, the authors that I work with are authors that really want to make a difference, that want to put out products that children can enjoy with their families. And so we are more of a publishing service. We step away. We don't deal with royalties. We don't deal with we let the author take care of all of that. They pay us for our services.
Do you put your books on KDP or Ingram's?
Oh, yes. Our books are on KDP. Our books are on Amazon. Our books are distributed
Ingram
globally.
Spark?
Ingram, all of that is done. Is part of the service that we provide.
So
we also help our authors get a Library of Congress number, set up their own accounts in their own name.
Right. So and you get the ISBN numbers and all of that. But
yes,
but it's all done through
numbers.
Right. Yes. But each individual author gets their own ISBN numbers. They get their own.
So their ISBN numbers come from Solander Press. So that way they can put the Solander Press logo on their book.
Uh-huh.
And so we really kind of consider ourselves to be a new breed of indie publishing, because our as I said, I get requests probably daily from people with manuscripts, and I only take the ones that I think are really, really going to be top notch,
right?
And so have social themes that are popular in today's world,
right?
Well, the business has changed so much. When I wrote my first book, which did not get published, I was an overnight success after 40 years. But when I first wrote that thing, nobody did any kind of indie stuff unless, let's say, it was a corporate history or a family history that you kind of knew going in. It had no commercial value. Nobody was going to buy it if they didn't work there or if they weren't part of the family. And the business has changed so much since then. Did that? I'm not sure when you started writing, but did that affect you?
Oh, yes, it did. One of the earliest books I wrote way back when was with a friend of mine named Marcia Camp, and basically we were in our 40s. She was in her 50s. We both lost our parents, and the surviving parent didn't have any credit, didn't know what to do. So we got the idea of we should write a book about what to do when your spouse dies. And we called it, You Can't Leave Till You Do the Paperwork. And we published it through Ex Libris, which was about the only thing out there at the time. We had to buy, I don't remember how many hundreds of copies we had to buy in order to do it. But that was back in the early 90s. We got really lucky because the National Funeral Home Association thought, oh, this would be great to give away. So they bought a whole bunch of them from us as giveaways, and a lot of funeral homes picked them up, and we made our money back and a little more. But, that it has changed dramatically. And I see so many authors that, I heard one the other day that said, well, I won't publish with Solander because I don't need an editor.
Oh, yes, they do.
I will not publish anybody that will not go through. We have a pretty rigorous editorial. We have great people that help us with layout and design. I have a group of illustrators that I will help them work with. I've met some wonderful illustrators along the way. I'm trying to get more illustrators of color, illustrators from underrepresented populations. I do have one of my illustrators, Armand, who did my book, and he did another Solander book, is a young Black man from Ohio who is just incredible. I have also of late been working with some Israeli illustrators, and then I'm in the process right now of talking to 2 illustrators that I met in London last year who are from Ukraine, who are still trying amidst everything to hone their craft.
I'll bet.
So I'm really trying to do the same thing for illustrators that I'm doing for writers, is to help them have a place, but a place that's high quality and that has something we can all be proud of.
Cool.
That sounds really exciting. Really, really, really does. So how can writers avoid predatory vanity presses?
Chances are, if something's too good to be true, it is.
Right.
I won't name any names, but I did get involved with a press that looked legitimate. And once I got into the workings of it, unfortunately, I signed a contract, and it was not a good experience.
When I finished my first book, I sent it out, and within 10 minutes, somebody said, we want to publish your book. And I thought, my first thought, because I was absolutely inexperienced, was, boy, that's going to be cool. And then I dug a little deeper and I thought, oh, no. And at the end of the day, it took 16 submissions before I finally found a publisher. So it's tough. It's a tough business.
It is tough. I recommend that you look at your organizations. You know, if you want to write for children, then join the Society for Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, SCBWI. You know, they put out a list every year of reputable service providers, reputable publishers. Look on Writers Beware. There's a lot of information there. But, you know, find out. I'm a member of several Facebook groups, and find out, hey, has anybody ever worked with so-and-so? And if you do get a contract, spend the money to get somebody, preferably an intellectual property lawyer and not your third cousin's brother's son who happens to be going to law school.
Real estate lawyer.
To look at that contract and to make sure that you're not going to be charged if they don't meet what they say they're going to do and you want your rights back. Because to me, when I see that in a contract, that's the very first thing that lets me know, run away.
Well, you know, and everybody thinks that he or she has a book in them, and they do, for a variety of reasons. The rejections are soul crushing, for lack of a better term. And you can see why people would sort of jump on something just because I'm there, you know.
And so that's why, you know, I say do your homework. I mean, I was heartbroken when I met a lady last year when I was at the London Book Fair that had spent $12,000 with one of these vanity presses getting her book out. And the book looked, I'm sorry to say, the paper was poor quality. The illustrations were poor quality. The editing was non-existent. So just, you know, do your homework.
Do your due diligence. Yeah.
Do your due diligence and ask for. One of the things I didn't do that I wish I had done, ask to speak to some of the staff. If their publishing house is a revolving door, and you know they're changing staff every 4 or 5 months, a lot of staff. That's a red flag. Talk to some of their other authors, you know, because they sometimes can give you a really good indication of what goes on behind closed doors.
Right. You're listening to Clarissa Willis chatting about her publishing and writing experiences, coming to you live weekly on Saturdays at 8 a.m. and Sunday at 7 a.m. on KWRH 929.com, KXOK102.com, iHeartRadio app, Odyssey app, TuneIn app, and Monday to Friday, 2 p.m., 7 p.m. nationwide on My Genre Radio Network. You can also listen to us anytime on SoundCloud and YouTube. So why is what does the marketing research matter? So in making publishing so successful, how come that matters so much?
Well, it matters because, you know, as I said, as a children's writer, I'm a member of SCBWI. Mm-hmm. So I go to my local SCBWI chapter and find out what's going on out there. I have been involved in writing groups, and I go to writers' conferences, and all of these are sort of part of the process, but it has changed. I mean, I get so tickled because people tend to think that when they get their book traditionally published, they still don't market. And you've got to market. And not only do you have to market, but you have to get involved with social media. You have to have a website. You need to have a business card that's professional. You need to, go to places where you can get to know other authors, because you never know where those types of connections are going to come in.
Absolutely. What do you think
can make?
What are the top social media spots do you think are the most important?
Well, it depends on what you're writing.
Okay.
If you are writing more speculative fiction, more of the sci-fi, fantasy, probably you want to go with Instagram. You want to look at some of those, YouTube especially. There's something called Book Talk that is out there now. Mm-hmm. If you are writing for children and if you're writing for families Facebook, because
Mm-hmm.
people of an older generation use Facebook, and quite frankly, grandparents tend to have a lot more money to buy books than young parents.
Yes, that's
So
true.
I do a lot of appealing to the grandparent out there, but it just really depends on what works for you. You know, some people have been very, very successful with, I guess it's X now, it used to be Twitter.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, again, you can't do all of them.
No, you
And
can't.
so, but you must have a website, and you don't have to spend a fortune.
No, you
But
no.
if you want to be an author that's recognized, you've got to build your brand.
Right.
So if you're writing for children, you can't be putting a lot of, I don't care if you have a separate author Facebook page from your personal web page, you can't be putting a lot of stuff that you wouldn't want children to see or hear.
Right.
So, you know, I tell all of my authors on Facebook, I don't care if you have a personal page and an author page, kitties and puppies, you know,
Kitties and
grandchildren,
puppies.
happy thoughts.
Happy thoughts,
Inspiration.
kitties and puppies. Yes. Yes,
Stay
yes,
away
yes.
from politics. I know a well-known author right now that's jumping right in the middle of all this political stuff, and she's losing readers and followers left and right. So I'm not saying don't stand up for what you believe in, but I am saying that
Do it in
as
the right
an author,
place.
Yeah. You got to be careful
you
about that.
really have to keep it. Now, if you're going to write sci-fi and you're going to write fantasy and you want to do things a little more edgy, you can get away with that.
Right.
If you're going to write for children and expect to go into schools and speak to children and speak to parents, you're
Stay
going
away.
to have to
Yes.
accept the
Yeah.
fact
Some
that
things
you're
you
gonna
just
wanna-
need to stay away from.
Yeah.
We-
They're going to
absolutely.
want to check.
Yeah.
Well, you know, Facebook, I have a couple of different Facebook pages, but inside that there are groups. I write mystery, so there's, a mystery writers group and a crime
Sure.
fiction group, and you can make connections through that, and
You can.
begin to meet people. I wanted to ask you about when you get a submission, how particular are you with regard to how well did this person write? How much editing are you willing to do, in other words?
I'm less particular with how well they wrote. As my main concern is, what else are you going to do? What other books do you have in mind? If they're going to sort of be a theme to what you're doing, I can teach someone how to write if they've got a good idea.
Okay.
If they don't have a good idea, it's really hard to take it and make it into a viable book. So I look at that. I predominantly work with people I know or have met or have been referred to me. Once in a while, one of my authors is a Supreme Court judge in another state, and she just heard me speak at a writers' conference and approached me with her idea. And she may never do another book, but it was a clever idea. So I look for clever ideas, but I also look for people just like an agent would. So many people say, well, I can't get an agent. Well, probably not if you've only got one book.
Yeah.
Right.
Agents typically want somebody that's going to continually produce.
Right.
And I have had an agent in the past. I don't like sharing my profits, so I don't have an agent now. I'm going to be perfectly blunt. It's very difficult for someone over a certain age, unless they have written a New York Times bestseller and the agent recognizes that instantly, for someone to get an agent, because an agent doesn't want somebody that's not going to be producing for them across a period of 10, 15, 20 years.
Right. They don't want to take their time up.
Well, that takes care of me then.
Well, me too, I'm afraid. Now, I'm not to say it's not possible. Just like, we're told indie publishers will not ever have their book picked up by a traditional publisher.
Well, that's not.
Well, that's not
Michael
true.
Anderson,
That's
That's
absolutely
that is
not true. No.
My Anderson, the ornithologist, has now been picked up by Frog Street, and I couldn't be happier because I know that company and I know the kind of quality things they put out. And, Anderson is now going to be heard by children all over, and I'm super excited about that.
Yeah, that's great. That's absolutely great. You're also part of the Ozark Creative Writers Guild.
Yes, it's the Ozark Creative Writers Conference.
Okay.
We are nothing but a not-for-profit group of volunteers who have been around since 1968. Now, I didn't come on the board quite then, but we put on a writers' conference every year, the second full week in October in Eureka Springs, Arkansas. And so OzarkCreativeWriters.com, you can look at that up and find out more about us. But
it was it was wonderful when I was there this past October.
Yeah.
It was a really good conference.
Does it have ongoing activities?
I'm sorry, what?
Does it have ongoing activities beyond the annual conference?
No, we only do the annual conference.
Okay.
There are other groups like the Ozark Writers League and OWSI, of course, Missouri Writers Guild, who do have some ongoing things. But we are not an organization that you join. We are just a group of volunteer boards. We're very fortunate to have some kind of heavy hitters on our board, but we put this on once a year. Another writers conference that I think is very well done, and I'm also on the board of that one, is the Between the Pages Writer Con, which is in Springfield.
Yep, been to that one.
That's also very good.
That one's a very good conference. This year we're having all of our Solander authors are coming from all over the country, and we're going to have a sort of a get together there for everybody to meet everybody.
Oh,
well, that sounds like fun.
So we're excited about that. But that's a great conference, and it's in Springfield. And so for people in the Springfield area, they don't have to worry about getting a hotel room. They can just come to the conference.
Right. Are there, besides those two conferences, what other conferences would you recommend?
Well, certainly the Missouri Writers Guild had a great conference this year. Sounds like it had a wonderful turnout. Unfortunately, the last 2 years, that conference has been when I was out of the country.
Right.
But
it was a good conference.
I'm hoping at some point that I will be able to speak at that conference. But it's a good one. There are just lots of really good ones. If you're interested in writing mystery and writing, there's Killer Nashville, which is a big writers conference in Nashville every year. SCBWI does some online and some. But when you start talking about national conferences, you really start talking about quite a bit of money.
Yes.
Right. So one of the things who would you like to thank for having helped you with it up to this point?
Oh my gracious, there are so many. Probably 3 people that, of course, my grandmother, who had an amazing life for someone who started out without anything. Dusty Richards, who many people know, Western Writers, was a mentor of mine for many years. He's the one that first said, don't talk about being a writer, writers write, which had an impact on me. Dr. Rebecca Isbell from East Tennessee State University, who was my boss and my mentor there. Dr. Isbell really helped me learn the ropes of writing for teachers. I've worked with some amazing people now. Sharon Keziah Holmes, who is just my right-hand person, and we do a lot of work together with her company, Paperback Press. She does the layout and design for my Solander books. Sharon is just an incredible resource. But there's been so many people. But I think more than anything, it was just whatever it was that came through my mother's side of the family. You don't give up. You don't quit.
You don't quit.
Something, you just
one foot in front of the other.
And I don't know how much time we have left, but I had a great grandmother who bought a cardboard manger scene the day before Pearl Harbor and put it up on her mantle. And of course, the next day was Pearl Harbor. And at one point, 4 of her 5 grandsons were there. And she vowed that everyone was going to come home as long as she kept that cardboard manger scene up on her mantle. And it came to pass. And this was a great grandmother who had lots of adversity in her life. And so I inherited that I still have that cardboard manger scene, and every year I wonder, is it going to go together this year? And it does. But I imagine the women from my mother's side of the family who just didn't give up.
Okay.
I think they have influenced me more than anything.
All right. So we got 2 minutes. What's next for Clarissa Willis?
Well, I am working on my memoir.
Okay.
I don't know if I'm going to call it From the Penthouse to the Pokey or the Preacher's Daughter Confesses.
Oh, I like the Preacher's Daughter Confesses.
Well, you can always go back to a life of crime.
And to talk about some of my experiences just growing up as a minister's daughter, and then even adulthood, losing a spouse and having some things happen that, were able to point me in the right direction. So that's kind of what I have next.
Okay.
All right.
On the burner, that and Solander, and just continuing to try to help authors in any way that I can make their dreams come true.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Clarissa, for being on Author's Edge. Tune in again next week for more tips, resources, and your favorite conversations. Our next guest will be Morley Swinger, and we will be chatting with him about his latest teen young adult historical comedy book called What Hump? Till then, see you around the inkwell.